Hello and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Dr. Westman. This is an episode brought to you by Adapt Your Life Academy, and today's topic is going to be why you don't have to eat fruit on a keto diet. We also have a bonus for you. It's Dr. Westman's free 10 things you need to know to lose fat on keto. We'll put a link for you in the description. How are you doing, Eric?
Doing great. How are you, Glenn?
Very, very good. Thank you. Eric, I came to visit you in your clinic. Myself and Yale came to visit you about 5-6 years ago. And one of the things that was very prominent in your examination room was a sign, and it said, "Fruit is nature's candy." What do you mean by that?
Well, that it should be limited like candy. I mean, it's really, fruit is just sugar with coating and maybe some antioxidants so in the method we teach a simple way to do keto, fruit and berries are really just too sugary to have on this kind of program. Yeah, fruit makes you fat is another sign that I had for a while. We had to clean up the walls now, and I have a more of a teaching list of foods to have and not have in the office, so that we can use that as a teaching tool. But yeah, the fruit is nature's candy. It often was kind of a eye opener to people who had been taught all their lives they have to have fruit. I mean, why wouldn't you think that? You see it on advertisements all the time, and commonly people say, "But I thought it was healthy, the fruit." And I said, well, let's just explain and learn about the number of carbs in there and why you want to restrict it. But yeah, no fruit or berries. That works best that way.
So you touched on that, and that we've always been taught, that fruit is healthy. I mean, one of the things we've always been taught is eat 2 or 3 fruits a day to keep the doctor at bay.
We have an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
Yeah, that's another one. And, really, if you break it down, Eric, our bodies don't really understand the difference when you're putting fruit in your mouth or sugar in your mouth. At the end of the day, it all gets broken down into glucose in any case. So maybe you could just explain that as to, why do you say that fruit is nature's candy? What actually happens when you take a bite of an apple, you eat an apple or two? What actually happens?
Well, now you're making a good distinction that our brains and our body perceive things differently. So the fruit doesn't look exactly like sugar on a spoon or like a potato, but it does get digested to, I guess, more precisely to glucose and fructose. Sucrose is a disaccharide, so it has 2 sugars on it, and fructose is one of them. So if you've heard about fructose being bad, and Dr. Robert Lustig at the University of California, San Francisco has a kind of a mission to tell everyone about fructose. And you may have seen his viral video some years ago with millions of views, and fructose. But fructose never occurs by itself in the environment. And even high fructose corn syrup is really the combination of fructose and glucose. So all of this gets digested, and starches will be really just glucose down to glucose, gets absorbed into our bloodstream, comes up to the brain, and gives that reward of dopamine at the brain's reward center. And that's why people might feel like they can't ever give up fruit. It's such a good way to deliver sugar that you might feel like you are addicted to it or can't give it up. Being addicted meaning you couldn't think of living without fruit, and what will I do if I don't have cantaloupe in the morning or an apple, things like that? Well, you'll be fine. There's nothing in fruit that's not in the other foods, which gets into the other kind of marketing thing that we've heard, that where would you get vitamin C if you didn't have fruit, right? Because you hear orange juice, vitamin C, get your vitamin C. Well, actually, other foods have plenty of vitamin C for you. But that whole getting digested to sugar, to glucose and fructose is not generally known, and because it tastes different, we don't think of starches and sugars and fruits all as the same thing, but to our body, it is the same thing.
Now, for people that are still doubting this and still think that fruit is the healthy thing to be eating, there's a couple of tests that they could do. I mean, one of the tests that someone could do is they could take their blood sugar reading prior to eating some fruit. Then they could eat a fruit, and then between 35 minutes and 45 minutes later, they can retake their blood sugar. And what will happen?
Well, it's going to go up because a big part of that fruit you had will be digested to glucose, and glucose in the stomach goes into the blood, and glucose raises the blood glucose, or the blood sugar is that type of sugar called glucose. So when we say check your blood sugar, we really mean check your blood glucose. And what's interesting is we're not even measuring the fructose side of things, which actually fructose goes to the liver and is one of the key factors in fatty liver. So, and I've seen people dissect out, well, actually it's fructose and all, but fructose is found naturally in foods like fruit. It's pretty close, like fructose, but it's not just fructose. I mean, so I've seen people, doctors, well-intentioned, try to just dissect this down to the detail of precision, that all you really need to know is that raising the fruit or eating the fruit raises the blood sugar, and we don't want that.
Now, one of the worst things, there's something worse than eating fruit, and that is actually juicing. That's taking the fruit and then putting it in a blender and then juicing that fruit, because what people don't actually or are not aware of is that a lot of the fiber contains the fruit, the sugar. And when you juice, it breaks those fibers open and releases all the sugar. So you see people in the morning, you see a lot of people thinking that they should have their orange juice, and they think that they being healthy, when in fact it's, I don't know how many times worse, but it's a lot worse than just eating the fruit as well.
Well, yes. And I mean, we should say that this is if your metabolism needs you to do a low carb diet. I mean, there are some people that can tolerate that kind of sugar bomb, so to speak, or sugar uptick, especially if you're young and you're otherwise active, that sort of thing. But if you're trying to do a keto diet, then juicing is, it's worse than having the whole piece of fruit, I was looking recently just at other ways to give fruit and fruit plates or cheese plates. And what some restaurants do is they give a wafer thin slice of an apple, for example. Wafer thin meaning just a very thin slice, so that you get the taste of the apple with the crunchiness, and then you put fat on it like cheese. But you would never have an entire piece of fruit at one of these fancier restaurants. Because they want their clientele to stay skinny. they want, it seems to me the fancier restaurants you go to, the less food there is on the plate, and the more fat there is, less sugar there is, because these are the factors that are healthier. And we gravitate toward those sorts of things, although it's hard to resist that juicing or orange juice in the morning if that's what you're accustomed to. And some people do have to go through kind of a craving the first day or two, but it's remarkably quick. I've had people kind of lament, oh, my fruit, what will I do? And then, they come back a week later kind of embarrassed that they had such drama about something that was so easy to give up. But if you never try giving it up, you won't know.
Now, what about the fiber in fruit? Because that's another thing that you hear. Well, I need to have my fiber. I need to have fruit because it's full of fiber, and fiber is healthy for us.
Well, that's a whole nother story of fiber getting all this attention. And then when the clinical research is done, meaning in people, adding fiber to diets really hasn't been found to be necessary. It hasn't added any health benefits by adding fiber. And I know that a lot you're going to go to and see here all the health benefits of fiber, but when you really do the critically important studies where they're carefully controlled, fiber really hasn't amounted to much as a medical treatment. You might have bowel movements easier, that sort of thing, and that can be important. But the fruit and fiber itself, the fiber in fruit, is just kind of a distraction.
Now, there's also fiber in a lot of the vegetables that you advocate as well on a keto diet.
Well, right. So when you're doing a particularly well-formulated keto kind of approach, you do get vegetables and leafy greens, which have fiber, but so you don't need the fruit to. So if you're still worried about fiber, you're not taking my advice on it. That's okay. You still do get fiber from leafy greens and non-starchy vegetables that are allowed on a keto diet. So it's not a zero fiber diet. There are other ways to get the things that are in fruit and berries that by not having fruit and berries.
Now, is there any keto-friendly fruit that if somebody absolutely must have and they simply cannot give it up, is there any fruits that are lower in sugar than some other fruits?
Sure, and it's as easy to find out as Googling it. So actually, or how sweet it is. So the sweeter the fruit, the more sugary it is. So the more tart a fruit or berry is, the less sugar there will be in it. And of course, the little joke is, well, you just want a very small amount of fruit. And that's another way to think of it, that as long as you're not having a trigger food that makes you, face plant into the whole thing of berries, a little bit of fruit will be okay. And there are some products that measure out little bits of fruit, like in a yogurt cup, for example. And some people even use a berry or two, not 10, to sweeten their vegetable smoothie. So if you can't give up the idea of having a smoothie, you like it, you bought the juicer, it's okay. You juice vegetables and maybe add a berry or two that are for the sweetness, because you don't want to have honey, you don't want to have sugar like that. But if someone's really like having to fix diabetes and having hundreds of pounds to lose, I highly recommend that you just get the fruit and berries out of your life for a while, because it's so easy to go back. And there's usually kind of a seasonal change in fruit availability that also brings in we always used to go pick strawberries and things like that with the family. And so because fruit is nature's candy, you want to limit that. And my best advice is to just get it out for a while. And you can go back to it eventually. So the small fruits and tart fruits. So that's why, for example, grapefruit, when you don't add sugar or sweetener to it, is very tart. And you've probably noticed that there are grapefruit diets, or back in the day, half of grapefruit was part of a morning routine with cottage cheese or some other low carb breakfast. That's because grapefruit's not sweet. And so, but it's larger. So you want to be careful again about the size of the fruit that you have. And but think about it, you don't have to have the serving size, the fruit piece of fruit every time. You can have half of it, a quarter of it. And I'm told, I don't know all the detail, but the type of fruit today is much larger than, say, 100 years ago, or naturally found apples are very small, but we've by genetic engineering changed the size of fruit to be larger, fruitier, or sugarier. So, but that's one thing, is to avoid or limit the amount. And a lot of people will do that, not totally abstain from fruit, but just have a little bit.
So before we go, what is your pro tip for helping folks to give up fruit? What would you tell them? What advice?
Yeah, I found that fruit flavored things will help quite a bit. So we do allow for having non-sugary substitutes for things. So things like sugar-free Jello, sugar-free gelatin, if you like that. There are many different fruit flavors, even fruit-flavored diet sodas. So fruit flavor is a way to give you the idea that you're having sugar, having the fruit, but you're not. You're not getting the same metabolic effects of the fruit when you're having something that's sugar-free diet fruit flavor. And that's one thing that gets a lot of people over this hurdle of getting off fruit.
Well, that's awesome, Eric. Thank you so much for giving us your tips for today. We really appreciate it. Don't forget to get your bonus, which is Dr. Westman's free 10 things you need to know to lose fat on a keto diet. The link will be in the description. As we always mention, if you'd like to learn more about Adapt Your Life Academy and our upcoming courses, you can find us on adaptyourlifeacademy.com. Eric, thank you so much again. We really appreciate it and look forward to catching up with you again in a week's time for another Conversations with Dr. Westman. Thank you so much.
If you like this video, you're going to love our Adapt Your Life Academy. So click on the link in the description to find out more.